Good morning, everyone. So, why don't we start with our prayer practice? We're going to work a little bit on quieting the mind. It's a technique that I presented a couple months ago. So, as some of you may have noticed, that it's important to have a mind that is still. So exactly what does that mean? That means you can sit in awareness or walk or talk. Talking is more advanced, but you could be present without having what's called in the Eastern teachings discursive thinking. It's just random thoughts, so you think about the past and the future, and your mind is kind of doing its thing, and you're not able to be 100% present in what you're doing or present in what you're seeing. So the mind is inherently luminous. That means it's inherently alive and conscious and present. And that's the core of the mind. And the thoughts are above that. Okay? So our minds continually race. It doesn't stop. Always the thought, always thinking about the past, thinking about someone. The mind is sort of everywhere, correct? And we identify that as our mind. And often we identify that as who we are, right? So we're kind of identifying with the moving clouds, if you have it, the moving energy, right? But truly our consciousness, our presence, our soul presence is beneath that. And it emanates an energy that if the mind isn't trained, it kind of leads to all sorts of thoughts that we don't have control over, which in turn causes to do actions or say things without being fully in control of the impulse to say it. It's not said fully consciously. Does that make sense? So how is it important in prayer to relate more with the conscious aspect? And the reason is, if one can truly focus, then the prayer is that much more powerful. Also, one's able to better connect. It's like, in today's society, everybody thinks we could multitask and it's the same level of action or perfection, or you'll get the same result if you multitask with 3 or 4 things as opposed to one thing. Maybe. But in my experience, just focusing on one task, you do it better, and actually you do it faster and better and in a more clear way by not being distracted. So our brain has multiple thoughts going on at the same time. By learning to center, you gain presence. And you begin to learn that we're much more than our thoughts and our minds and who we think we may be. And once you learn to have presence, when you look out of your eyes, there's something much more profound in us that is conscious. And the thoughts are merely an expression of it, but how to put it? they're kind of not our best friend. It's a lot of subconscious and impulsive, and it's sort of everywhere. If we're able to settle in something a little deeper, we now start resonating with what is called our true selves. It's, at its very core, it's perfected. It's perfect. It's what maybe we can call in a spiritual religious vocabulary a pure soul. But we have so many layers on top that sort of cover it up. Imperfections, right? Some of it could be extreme imperfections. Some could be minor, right? And as we start to calm ourselves, we start to becoming aware of them. And once you grow in awareness, you're able to change it. You get back into a greater control of your life. I often say being aware of something is 80% of the way of changing it. And I found that to be very true. It doesn't mean that the last 20% is easy, but a lot of it is becoming aware. I often use the analogy of driving your car. Try to be conscious to go where you want to go. Often with the way our minds race with thoughts, we really don't think things through. We kind of do things out of habit. And often, and I use this analogy in sort of Eastern circles I used to be in, the teacher, used to say, well, we're kind of in the back seat and our thoughts and our minds, so the thoughts is what we would call our minds, right? We're in the back seat and that's sort of driving us. We're not fully in control, we're impulsive by our impulses. Energetic, do this, do that, correct? And I often said, I think we're kind of bound and gagged in the trunk, and our mind is kind of sort of doing its thing. It's important to learn to gain control of our mind. It's a tool. We're supposed to be in charge of it. It's something we're supposed to use, but honestly our mind is kind of using us. It's flipped. It's a tool which we exercise, which we use to think critically, to remember things, to analyze the intellectual aspects. Yes, but it's not where our identity lies, and that's not who we are. We're based in our minds in modern cultures when we should be based in our hearts. There is another form of intelligence within us. We can call it like a soul intelligence, an innate awareness that's below the level of the mind. And when we learn to make our minds calm, we start seeing the world differently. We start to understand ourselves differently, our place in the world, and we start getting both hands on that driving wheel. And the more we cultivate this sort of innate wisdom and consciousness within us, the more we start seeing the road clearer and clearer and clearer. Yes? At some point, you start tapping in to seeing so clearly that people start thinking you're psychic or something, or empathic. Yes, but you've just sort of kind of cleaned the instruments in your body, so to speak, that you're able to kind of fully use the gifts that we have. Yes? And when one begins to pray and try to act in a good way on this planet, it's much easier to do so because all of these habits and impulses and things you've kind of worked through being a sort of calm. You found peace within. You found the shalom within. And ultimately, the shalom, our heart, is what's directly connected with God. Our mind is a tool that dies with our body. We're not our minds. I know, it might be shocking. It takes a while to study, to listen, it takes a while to understand this. This is some very deep Eastern truths, and it exists in the West as well. There is a source of wisdom that's beyond the mind that you could access when you have no thoughts. You just know things. It's knowledge with a capital K. You just know it. But your mind isn't thinking. For an example, I'm speaking to you now, and I've spoken with no thoughts. My mind is present. I'm actually looking at the window on some trees at the horizon, and I see the beauty, and my mind is calm, and I'm speaking. So it's using knowledge that I have learned, but I'm not sort of preforming what I'm saying in my mind and saying it to you. I don't see it's just being expressed. And that is a form of consciousness that's aware and has the innate intelligence and wisdom behind it that we all have. And when one learns to kind of still the mind, our senses really open. A lot of our energy is spent in this sort of electrical storm of thoughts and feelings that go in our mind, and we say that is us. And then we identify with it. More that we identify with it, the more we identify with our existence as a human being on this planet. The more solidified it is, the harder it is to connect. Once we start moving beneath this, we open up more to the beauty that surrounds us, and our lives take on a mystical quality to it, because there's a lot of spaciousness. But that's also our birthright. We start coming home to a self that's more purified. If you've been around people who have a high spiritual attainment, rabbis or priests or monks or saints, if you've been around living saints, you'll see that they're often very calm, and they have an energy of peace that surrounds them. And often people see them, go to them or hear them, because they feel this peace and they feel a healing being around them. It's because they've tapped into that source. And so it's this source, when we say the names of God, is a very powerful way to cleanse our minds and to be able to tap into the source, because the names have a lot of grace and blessings. And with them, and the calmness we get when we recite the names, and also it has the mind focuses on saying the name, so there's not a lot of room for what we call discursive thoughts or emotions, right? For them to kind of rise up. So it actually trains the mind to stay present, and in that form, it's present in the names. We train. While in prayer, it's like a twofer. I love twofers and threefers, right? So, right? And the threefer, well, it contains great wisdom, which in turns, and grace and blessings, which in turns also further calms the mind. With a calm surface, we can better see what's underneath the water. A turbulent mind is like a water. That sand has been kicked up, you can't see anything. As you calm the mind, the sand settles, the thoughts settle. Then you see the clarity. And with that, you see more of what was always there, but was just obscured. That is a very traditional analogy in Eastern Buddhism. Okay? How does this apply to our religions? Well, we get to understand our nature as the children of God, because that's the core. And we get less caught up in our lives and things that aren't as important, because we start seeing clearer what matters, why we're here, where we're going, better present for our families, our children, more focused when we study or when we're at work, which is important. Because we live in this world, studying religious texts helps you with religious development, helps you educate yourself, help teach others. Being a student in school, and a good one, helps you to be able to provide for yourself and for your family in the future. So it has both what we call mundane, meaning worldly benefits, as well as benefits in the spiritual religious part of ourselves, the eternal aspects of ourselves. So, having said that, we're going to work on using the names of God with pausing, with putting space in between certain periods of reciting a name of God. So we would say the name for like a minute or two, however you feel. Then you take a pause. And then when you feel that either you've become distracted, and sometimes 30 minutes later, you're like, oh my God, where did I go? You don't even realize you got distracted, and suddenly you're like, hold on, whoa, it's been 30 minutes. That is fine. That happens to everyone, especially at the beginning. And the prayer the meditation is bringing your mind back to what you were doing. So then you catch yourself, and then you say the mantra again, you put in a little space. Now, if you find that you put in too much space and you're distracted and you don't notice for a while, then maybe only wait 30 seconds and then say it again. For a little while, then you sit. So several things happen here. First thing, if you're able to feel the energy of the name of God that you sort of create by the recitation of the name, or if you're not, it's still there, the energy, okay? By resting, by having the pause, it allows it to deeply penetrate into your body. And it goes down to a cellular genetic level, okay? Whether you can feel it or not. With time, you are able to feel it at those levels. Your mind becomes clear, your body becomes clear, you can see and feel things at a deeper, more profound level, okay? It comes with time. I'm only showing you kind of the road heading there, so you kind of have an understanding of where you're going, which I think is essential, and I'll help you get there faster, okay? So you got the blessing, and it goes deep, right? Then you try to remain present, okay? And you could feel the energy, you could put the mind and the energy you've created. If you happen to see a vision when you see the name, and it is very possible, then you focus on the vision you're having, Okay. Now, sometimes when you have that, you kind of need, especially at the beginning, to continue saying the name, so the vision could ride on top of the name you're saying, of the energy you're creating by saying the name repeatedly. Does that make sense? Now, if you say it too strongly, it'll take over the vision. This is an advanced thing, okay? So I'm kind of sowing the seeds, and I don't know where people are at, and so this is sort of a kind of an instruction if that should occur. Don't try to push for it. It should spontaneously arise, okay? All right, and that leads credence that it's real when it just pops up, okay? Especially if it shows you something that you're not inclined to see, all right? And this is why I also encourage people to have a prayer space and an altar with sacred syllables or whatever brings you calm, objects, pictures. I have a beautiful picture of the 72 names of God in front of me. Beautiful candle holder with multiple colors of glass in it, which I love. A little incense, candle in the candle holder, and I have a picture of one of my dear teachers who's no longer with us. Right? He used to say, and I wanted to say it earlier, but now looking at his picture, I will say, and I thought this was a very gracious statement. People think meditation is actually the act of meditating. Like I'm meditating, right? And if the mind wanders, they think that's no longer meditation. And this was a great master. He said, the act of meditation is when your mind wanders, that you bring your mind back to the object of your meditation. So, if our minds wander and we bring it back, that is meditation. I'd never heard it explained that way before. He was a very kind man, very gentle, sweet man. And I thought that was a very gentle and sweet instruction, and a very truthful one. So we should have a light touch. If our minds wander off, that's fine. We bring it back. We are training ourselves. If we're reciting the 72 names of God and our minds are thinking on something else, focus on what you're reciting, or also look at your objects in your prayer space. 60 to 70% of the energy of the mind is through the optic nerve to the eyes. So what you're looking at is where the mind's going to be focused. So if you do a light touch, just looking at it, without analyzing what it is, but just looking at it, that anchors your mind. Then saying the name as well, the mind will stay very focused. It's really essential. You can have a sense of presence to people who are suffering. You can have a sense of presence and see this world clearly for what it is and how to live in it. You are able to study and learn things and remember them better. Or connect thoughts. This is the good use of thoughts, because the thoughts are on topic to what you're studying, and be able to make connections between various things. And one begins to tap into what's known as higher mind, a more wisdom mind. This is how people are able to have thoughts or analysis that other people haven't necessarily put together or created, because that wisdom mind is able to see things in a different way. It's like a little higher vibrational mind, but it lives within us. Yes. In sort of the chakra thing, it would be the crown chakra and above. So the Christ consciousness, God consciousness, would be above our heads. That's why we get the sense that God's above us. When you see the halo of the saints, Do you notice it's around them? And it's gold. Right from above. Does that make sense? So it's a fundamental understanding, getting back to the basics of where we are. And then when one creates the stability, when one says the names of God, one feels it in an ever deeper way. And the mind opens. And one is able to develop an ever closer connection with God. Because the storms and the clouds are clearing, so you could connect. You're able to connect better and easier. You're able to stop bad habits, bad conduct, bad speech, right? Easier, because the strength of the storm of the mind has weakened. So your will or intent to stop it has less to come up against, less to fight through, or less to overcome. And it's not so much by pushing, but by relaxing. So you do it with a light touch, because ultimately at our core, right, we are pure. I know with some religious groups they might take issue with that. We are not We are children of God. At our core, we have God's purity within us. We are not at our core sinful. Outside of our core, we may have developed sinful habits or not so good habits. But inside of us, there is some real pureness. So by releasing what doesn't serve us, we return to God. And we are learning to release these energies just by relaxing, and our body just naturally, and you'll be able to feel it after a while. You'll feel energy just radiating out of your body, releasing, you're relaxing, your shoulders begin to crack, you feel lighter. Sometimes I've just had an exhale and be like, and actually just move forward just from the relief. And then when you put yourself back upwards, you just see clearer, you feel connected. Depression lifts, anxiety lifts. So there are really important spiritual components to this, but there are very important spiritual, real world, spiritual is real world too, but there's real health benefits, psychological benefits, which in turn, when one is healthier in body and in mind, then you have that much more energy and focus for yourself, for others, for your religion, through thinking, feeling, doing, creating a purpose in life that you're proud of. And that's what God wants for us. He wants us to be happy here. He wants us to have good lives. He doesn't want us to be suffering. God is not a being that wants suffering for his people. So let's do that together, okay? So this is very important. When you recite the names of God, put little pauses. When you feel the energy absorb and then it's absorbed, place your attention on your prayer area and try to remain present. If you have sacred symbols on your prayer thing, there's a blessing through seeing. I have a picture of the names of God before me. The letters of the names carry a blessing through sight. Yes, that's real. So you're receiving a blessing through what you're looking, and you're in that prayer space. So you're in communion with God because you just repeated his name. And so by being there present and not doing anything, you are in the presence and communion of the divine energy that you've created. And that would be a form of prayer. Prayer doesn't always need to be active. You just are aware and open to that space of prayer, of communion. And when you see thoughts come in, or you became unfocused and went off somewhere in your mind, then you bring yourself back to where you are in your room in front of your prayer altar, and then you say the name again. And this could be a practice that you could start for 15 minutes, building up to 25, 30, 40, 45, or after. The longer you do with time, the deeper effect it will have on you. There's a magic that happens around 15 to 20 minutes. The mind just can't deal with it anymore, and it kind of finally lets go. And before then, it could feel a little intense. It's like the Starship Enterprise that's entering a nebula, and everything shakes in the ship, and people are getting tossed, and the ship might, blow up. And sometimes it feels like that when you're entering that space. The mind's just putting a lot of resistance, and if you're able to breathe through it, and sometimes you need to pull back, but with time you kind of learn when to just stay with it, and it's not too bad, and you just kind of make it through to the other side, and then you're a little surprised as to what's there, and you're like, oh my God, what's this? And you start having an understanding of a different space. And I think ultimately that's the beginning of returning home to God from within, and all sorts of bounty and blessings and abilities are there waiting to be discovered. And that's our birthright, that's our divine inheritance. And it'll make living on this planet much easier. And then when you go to die, there's really no worry where you're going, because you've been connected to that all your life. Your just body's going to go, and you're going to a better place, and off you go. There's no fear, and there's actually probably great joy in it. And possibly a feeling of bliss, golden light, multicolored lights. You may even have visions of religious figures. It's because you've been connected with that deeply within you. Yeah? Let's practice this. So I say practice because that's more of an Eastern term, but you learn by repetition. So it's not a practice because we're praying throughout. So we're not practicing to pray. So I've got to find a new word. But we're not practicing to pray, okay? We are praying. But the more you pray through repetition, the more you have an effort to do it, and the more often you do it, the easier it is. So you kind of have to, go through the motions and do it. And so that's the Eastern term of practicing. Okay? You get good by doing it. So let's light our prayer shrine. So you light the candle, inviting the presence of God, or if you're not as religious, you just sort of inviting in goodness or blessings or clarity or life, however you wish to see a candle as being. And then you offer up incense by lifting it up over your head to what you to the qualities of the divine. If you're using a name, you could lift it up to El Shaddai, if that's the name, or to Yahweh, or to all 72 names. And you just think, to all 72 names of El Shaddai, or Yahweh, or Emmanuel, whichever one you're using. And if you're not as religious, I offer this to to the purity that exists all around us, to the conscious mind of the universe, or to all that is sacred. That's a beautiful one that was taught, which was shared by someone who's not particularly religious. To all that is sacred, I raise this up. All that is sacred and good and holy, right? Which would include God. But if you're not as religious, you could offer it up to that. And that's a beautiful prayer, okay? Because there's many different peoples in this group, so I'm trying to find something for everyone, so we offer it up. I feel to use Yahweh today. So, as always, use the one that you feel appropriate or you feel called to use, okay? So I always start with my fingertips together like I've mentioned before, okay? Yahweh, 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 Yahweh. So as we say that, we sort of I reached out to Yahweh and asked for His presence. You know, as we say it, it's a calling out for Him to arrive, right? And the energy is from the first syllable. He's there in the name as well. And then we try to find that calmness and rest in it that we're summoning, okay? Yahweh, 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 Yahweh. Keep reciting. Now I've put my hands on my knees so they feel comfortable. And now I sort of rest in this space that I've cultivated. Try to keep your mind still. And it's not a holding on to the mind. You release the mind into stillness. Any thoughts that come up, you just let it go. You can exhale or just feel a release of any tightness, and the thought just kind of drifts out. Alright, so we'll recite the name again, and then we'll practice that, okay? Yahweh, Yahweh. So as long as you feel that connection, just stay in that feeling of the connection. And if you don't feel or the connection's gone away, you can still stay in that presence to train your mind. Very important, yes? But if you wish to reconnect with that feeling, then you say the name again. But definitely if you lose the connection and your mind wanders, then you gently bring it back and you say the name again and you reconnect. Yahweh, Yahweh, Yahweh. Okay. So I'd like you to encourage everyone to do this every day if you can. It doesn't need to be long, 10, 15 minutes. If you could start building it up to 30, 35, 40 minutes, then that's it. If you do 35 to 40 minutes, 40 minutes, 45 minutes every day, that's going to be very powerful. Okay? And it's a form of prayer. And then you could do traditional prayers afterwards where you actually, or you could set an intention at the beginning and then say the names of God while focusing on that intention. That's also very powerful. So this is really the basic practice that I wish to teach, with using the names. And then of course last 2 weeks ago we used the visualization practice and sending forth of energy. That's a little more advanced. And you see now, by having stability of mind and a deeper sense of clarity, it becomes much easier to do that practice, because there's more energy and focus available to start using energy in that way, by cultivating the energy of the names. Okay? So this was sort of the last piece I wanted to get back to after my teachings of the last 5 or 6 weeks. This, what I just shared today, that is really the core that people should really start with, in addition to any other practices they wish to do, because this core is extremely profound. It's 2 very powerful practices that lead to spiritual attainment. The sense of presence in space, which is the practice of Mahamudra and a form of Tibetan Buddhism. And then using the names of God as a mantra. Using of a name, and it's the sounds and what the name's directed at, the word, is one of the most profound and quick ways to spiritual realization. Even though it's so simple, but with practice and years of practice, it becomes extremely powerful. And the sense of space, because in the inside we are inherently pure and we're divine beings from God. We're the children of God. So inside of us there is purity. So by cultivating space and quietness and stillness, we let go of things that are not that. And we reconnect to what's pure and more to our true selves. And here I'm having you combine the 2, which is a form of advanced spiritual practice that I have been taught. So it takes practice, and it will take you all the way. It works for beginners, it works for advanced, and it works for those who are no longer beginner or advanced, because those are relative benchmarks, which honestly, at a certain level, that's just a thought in itself as well, and blocks advancement. Okay? So when we do our prayers, we are connecting ourselves to God. When we say the names of God, we are profoundly, energetically, down to our cellular level, reconnecting ourselves ever closer to a fuller connection with the divine. And if you're not as religious, you are connecting yourself to the pure state of being and consciousness and intention and conduct and anything that's good and pure and sacred that exists. And we grow and And I think that's a very honorable way to live one's life. So why I'm doing this is to help provide you all with the tools that I think would be most helpful from what I've learned of energetic practices that are more common in the Eastern tradition. So by using those technology, energetic technology abilities, and connecting it with the names of God, with certain techniques, I hope it would make it easier for people to connect with God. We can align through yogas, which clear up the body so we could better connect with higher states of vibration to divinity, right? All of these things, how we eat, eating healthier foods cleans our body, cleans our mind, healthy water, staying away from sodas. All these things help. And so we bring all these elements together to create sort of a formula to live as closely with God as possible, the way each of us feel that we are called to do. And with different traditions will be different ways, and for different people, even within those traditions or outside those traditions, they'll find ways that work for them. A little more exercise, a little this, or this type of prayer, or that type of prayer. But the core is the 72 names of God, because that's where the greatest blessings lie. Always say it very respectfully. And I wouldn't say it out loud in public. There are those that feel the name shouldn't be said because it's too holy. So you want to respect what they feel, but at the same time, God offered these names for us, I believe, to use them because we need them. It plugs us directly into the current of God. Why not do the easiest thing? Just plug in. Say the name, even if it's the first time, you are plugging in just by saying the sacred syllables of the name. Period. No need of years of practice and stuff. You're plugging in. The more you do it, well, the whole name is just really going to start making changes and connecting you, and you're going to realize, wow, the beginning you might get a couple volts, and then suddenly you're at 120 volts. Right? And, then you're really somewhere. You evolve spiritually very fast. And I think in this day and time when things are particularly solid, particularly challenging, particularly, just won't even, like the drug use, everything, it's just so hard. And popular culture, there's just so much difficulty of earning a good living, challenges with the children, and just everything, health issues, right? This really helps with all of that, in addition to everything else we do to try to help ourselves. Home base is what I described. And from that, you can do more. Like the practice, lying in bed at 3 a.m, you just say the name slowly for 30 or 40 minutes. If it feels too much, then you stop and you say it slowly. Yahweh, 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 Yahweh. Do you notice there's a pause between them? The energy absorbs. You wait a second or two and you say it again. That's profoundly clearing. It's also calling to God. You end up feeling it in your bones, and you feel a deep healing going on. There's always a deep healing when you reconnect to God, because anything that's damaged or not correct or in that vibration has to leave. The two can't live together. And the more you do it, the more that aspects of reunification occurs. There's no disease in heaven. There's no anger in heaven. There's no old age. There's no death. There's no jealousy. There's no hatred. There's no... a lot of things. Right? So as when we realign, everything that is not of God kind of drifts away. And the name is the embodiment of all that's aligned with God. Hence, why the names of God is probably one of the greatest treasures and legacies that God has left for us. And you will get out of it what you put in. So the more time you dedicate, but at the beginning I wouldn't do more than 15 minutes or 5 minutes. 10, build up slowly, right, over weeks. So I mean the amount of time you dedicate it is the amount of days you sit to do it. And it could be in a chair, wherever is comfortable, right? But it's when you sit down, I'm going to do this. So that counts as one time. Not necessarily the length. The length will get longer the more you do it, and you won't even be aware. When I started, I was just like, oh God, it was hard to get past 10 minutes, 15, 20, right? And then one time I thought, oh, that was a good 20 minutes. I looked on my watch, that was 45 minutes. And it doesn't mean that I lost presence, I was present, but the time just went away. So it's not like so much pushing, it just naturally you'll get calmer and it will happen. And then you'll start having a different presence and people are like, oh, I feel different around you. Strangers will come up to you and speak to you of their problems randomly. I lived in New York City, people in the subway would come up to me and just speak of their problems, and you're happy to listen, and it's just different. You act differently. Once in the subway, I saw a woman crying. What did I say to her exactly? I didn't know for anything. I think it was something along this side. I said, I feel called to say something. Your husband loved you very much, and he's always going to be with you, and it's going to get easier as time goes on. Her eyes bulged out. I could tell it hit home base because her eyes were like, how did he know that? And I said, wish you a good, beautiful day. And it was my stop, so I got out. Quick escape. How? How is one able to know that? You're in greater alignment, and then God starts using you. You're in alignment with God, and you become an agent of God here on this planet, making things a little better for people. And as people of faith or people wishing to better themselves, ultimately that's the greatest purpose to life. And those actions is what we take with us, and those actions are our greatest testament to us being here, and ultimately the greatest act of devotion to Yahweh. There's no greater act of showing love to God than to helping His other children and living a good, wholesome life. No lying, no stealing, no cheating, all that good stuff. That's giving true honor to God. That's showing true love to God by your actions, by your conduct, by how you live your life. When I die, what I hope when I get to heaven, God looks at me, He's like, wow, you really slayed it. Good job down there. I'm really proud of you. That's what I want to hear. I want my conduct to be such that God would say something like that to me. I'm really proud. You really did a good job down there. Wow, great job. Isn't that what anyone of faith would like to hear? Thank you for joining me this Sunday, and I look forward to being with you all next Sunday. Have a wonderful week. Bye-bye.